Shalom. So, I am just waiting for Kathryn and Eamon to connect. Kathryn is one of the moderators on the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, and Eamon is, I wanted to say her better half, but you can't. You can't really do that. So they are on their way. And they should be here any. And so Kathryn is organizing the event at Thunder Bay. I should probably. Conference. I am putting the link in the chat. So that is the conference in Thunder Bay, Canada, with John Vervaeke and Jonathan Pajot and Paul Vanderklein. And there's another professor who I don't know, Professor Richard Mondrell, a philosophy professor at Lakehead University. And it's in 63 days, 4 hours, 57 minutes, and 15 seconds. Thursday, September 15th, 8 p.m. to Sunday, September 18th, 10:30 p.m. And they already sold out the Paintball for Jesus tickets. So no Paintball for Jesus for you. And already too late for the early bird special. And I am talking to some people about something special that's possible that might happen as well. But since that is just getting started, we don't know about that yet. If people already have questions for Kathryn and Eamon, please feel free to type them out. I think they're both counselors. I'm not sure though. I'm pretty sure Eamon is a counselor. And this was kind of, so when I went on my trip, I had this thought that, we need to start building closer connections with people in our community and not being just atomized individuals and kind of, forming molecules. And I thought, you know what, the tightest molecule is really the couple who is involved. And no, you're thinking of the wrong person. Ben, you're thinking of Beth and Andrew. They don't teach Hebrew. You're Beth and Andrew. I wish I asked Andrew to come on the channel, but yeah, I'm not big enough, and they're really busy and stuff, so I couldn't get them to come on. But Kathryn, she was on Paul Vanderklay's channel with Eamon. Yeah, and her brother Scotland is the abbot at Urban Abbey, and so everything going on there. Yeah, Kathryn, people know because she's people here hopefully know because she's a moderator on Paul's Bridges of Meaning Discord server, which I highly recommend, and I'm very active on. So what I was saying was, I was thinking that couples are like the first unit beyond atomized individual in a community, and so like we really should be engaging more with people as couples, especially people who are married. You know, we have this idea that people on the internet are not, and so I'm pretty sure everybody has seen like the Facebook accounts or the Twitter accounts where you have a married couple sharing the account, and I think that's how it should be. That should be like considered the basic unit of a social account. But that obviously that's not how we treat it, and I don't even think that it's like the social media companies don't have couple accounts. They should have couple accounts, and we should in fact like deal with couples. Like, can you imagine if you were having a cocktail party and you invited somebody and not their spouse? That would never happen. But when we get involved in social media rooms or social media environments, we kind of expect married couples to walk into them as individuals, which makes no sense. I am sure that they are having technical problems. Hopefully, not too much. But yeah, so I was thinking, you know what? I need to have more conversations with couples, and I thought, well, what better person to start off those conversations um, with than to have a couple who went on Paul's channel as a couple. And then I'm gonna hit other people in our community up and see if I can get them to come in as a couple. I don't think we have people who are actually very much involved as a couple in any, like on the Discord server. I can't think of two people who are married to each other who are also active on Discord, which, like, there's no reason why that should be. A lot of the people who are active on Discord are married, and it's not like there they are.
Hello.
So, Eamon and Kathryn, I've never spoken to you before, Eamon. Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So I was, as I was explaining, I was saying that when I took my little trip all the way to Chicago and back, one of the things I thought about was how our bigger community, the Bridges of Meaning community, but this little corner of the internet, I didn't think I think we're too much of atomized individuals, and I thought the smallest molecule you could think of is the married couple. And I thought of you guys because I thought, you know what? It's kind of strange in real life, if I was having a party and I was inviting Kathryn, of course I'm going to invite her husband.
Mhm.
But if I'm going to have a conversation online, or if, even we kind of expect Kathryn to have a different online presence from her husband, which is weird. And so I thought of you guys particularly because you were on Paul Vanderklay's channel together. So I sent out this invite, and please introduce yourself. My channel is tiny. Pretty much everybody who watches is going to be part of the Bridges of Meaning stuff. And I don't know how much you know about me, Eamon, but I mostly try to teach biblical Hebrew, but I also rant a lot.
I think I've listened to some of Vanderklay's Q&As, and I know you make appearances every now and then.
I do, yes. And my favorites is when the Jacob in Paul's mind shows up in one of his videos. I don't know how much of his videos you watch, but like sometimes he's like, Jacob would say, like, I have occupied him. Mwah.
Oh, it's a big compliment to join his consciousness congress. That's a big deal. So
I am incredibly honored. I actually, so when I wrote the description for this, I started writing Kathryn and Eamon, her better half, just because we're used to like kind of doing like Paul. There would be no problem if you, Eamon, were the moderator, and we were gonna say, I was gonna say, oh, I'm having Eamon on with Kathryn, his better half, but that's kind of condescending, because if you do it the other way, people would get offended. If I were to write Kathryn and Eamon, her better half, people would be like, what do you mean by that? And since are you both counselors or just you, Eamon? I thought you're a counselor. I'm not sure, Kathryn. Are you a counselor?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're both counselors. Yeah.
So Eamon's a psychologist.
Okay.
And I'm a psychotherapist, which means he has a doctorate.
Okay.
And I have master's degrees.
So in United States terms, you're like an MFT. Okay. So you guys are the perfect people to talk about all this marriage stuff. Go.
It's funny when you mentioned that to me in the in your text to me with the thought of like, oh, Kathryn, the better half or whatever. And I was like, you're right. That flip. People have been saying that. I mean, I remember aunts and uncles saying that when I was a kid. People have used that phrase forever, but you would never use it the other way around. Which is an interesting thing to notice, that there's just this assumption that the wife would be the better half, or that it's acceptable to say that, but not acceptable to say that you would.
Douglas Murray brings this up. He's like, the feminist thing is to say women are at least as good, if not better, than men. Mm-hmm. You can't say women are better than men, but if you say men are better than women, then so it just shows how like there's a very obvious double standard there that makes zero sense if you're actually like thinking about it.
Yeah, it makes zero sense. The only way I could imagine justifying it in the past was that because men were seen as the head of the household, they were seen as the one in the power position, right? So if you were to be the one in authority saying, oh, here's my better half, you're elevating the person. But if you imagine that you're on the same level, or that the wife is above, now you're not elevating the other person anymore. You're demeaning them, or it's different when you switch the power player. But
yeah. So what do you think about my idea about relating to people more as couples, especially online, than we do now?
It's a place to start.
It is a juicy place to start. Well, I'll start off by affirming that you're noticing that is extremely, like, that's very real. And it is different. So it's interesting for me because in my personal life, I never hang out one-on-one with a man, right? I'll have women come over one-on-one, or I'll have women's groups come over, or we'll have couples come over, or we'll have a study with couples. It's not like I don't interact with men, and I work with men, but I would never just start sending messages back and forth with myself and another man. And in the real life, you wouldn't just oh, hey, Joe, why don't you come over and have coffee with me while my husband's away? I would never do that. Now, I'm sure there's probably women who would, but it is a very unique area in my life where socially it's different to interact as an individual online instead of, especially with men, right? I'm used to interacting with women as an individual, but we've almost been married for 18 years now.
Yeah, it's just a little over 17 now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we've been together for 18. And that just hasn't been part of my life for that long.
No. Well, and I would say, I realize I'm getting, there's a sample bias here, but the number of couples that I meet that are in distress because an online relationship has happened, it's really, really common. Reconnecting with somebody from college or high school, or meeting somebody new online, and that becoming a wedge in the relationship. I think there's a sense that there's some more safety when it's online because of the physical distance. But I think people are very emotionally vulnerable right now in our time, and how disconnected people are even from their own spouses. But yeah, I don't know.
So I actually started thinking, why doesn't Facebook actually have couple accounts? Why doesn't Twitter have couple accounts?
That's a really good question, because I don't think it's just that it started with individuals, so it's stayed that way. Because surely somebody must have come up with that idea. So it's probably been rejected at somewhere along the line.
Yeah, we have some friends that do run their Facebook accounts like that, even though the platform isn't designed for it.
That's true.
But yeah, most people don't. They're rare, very rare.
I mean, the cynical side of me is well, it's easier to advertise to each person individually through Facebook than it is to them as a couple. So you get to kind of double your advertising whammy and make sure you're hitting the right person if you keep them separated. But even the way that I interact when Eamon's not around it's different. And I don't think it's necessarily better. I know, who was it? It might have been you, but someone probably posted in the last 4 months, a link about, it was an article about the couple being the most basic unit of society instead of the individual.
I would love to read that article. That sounds like a really interesting article. I don't go into, so if I were to actually go into all the, the Discord servers, I don't even read all the messages on my own Discord server, much less read every channel on Bridges of Meaning. How involved are you with Discord, Eamon?
Not at all. I look over and Kathryn will show me funny things that people write, or articles, or insightful things that people share. But yeah, I'm not involved. I don't participate in it.
Yeah.
Well, which is very, very different from Kathryn, because she's like a moderator on Bridges of Meaning. So, as experts in perfect marriages, would you say that best practice is to share social media accounts to like I know some people, especially I was watching a video about the Amish community. And the Amish, well, there's a spectrum of Amish. Obviously, there's some Amish who don't use the internet at all, but the Amish were being interviewed, their church had a policy of you have to have your wife have access to all of your stuff, like all your computer stuff. Your wife gets to see it, and she's supposed to look.
Well, you can see some definite benefits to that, right? You can't exactly have a secret hidden life. Although everybody, if you're actually tech savvy, you could create like a little shelved away account, but you'd have to really work in advance to be secretive. You wouldn't just have something jump out at you in the same way that you could. But that is very different, to have a whole community policy to saying it's open, it's shared, nothing private. So we have different Facebook accounts.
Yeah.
Neither of us are on Facebook very much. I think the last time I posted was years ago. I initially made mine to make pictures, put up pictures for my mom to see of the kids. You post more regularly than I do, but not frequently.
No, and I made a post yesterday and realized it had been a year since my last post.
Yeah. So probably the social media you're on more is Twitter.
Yeah.
Because neither of us do like Instagram, Snapchat. We're not really social. So Bridges of Meaning was like a revelation for me, because I never do like internet conversation stuff. So Bridges of Meaning was my first like really dive into like an online community. And it just didn't draw you in the same way.
Yeah, part of it's that I've been so busy. And I think with around the time you were getting involved with Bridges of Meaning, work was just insane for me up here. Now, one quirk though of my work, I fly into remote communities in Northern Ontario for a week a month. Now, one of them is a place called Sachico Lake. The other one is Cat Lake, and they only have like an ice road for like a few months of the year, and the rest of the time it's accessible only by plane. And most of my clients don't have a telephone either, so I end up using like a separate sort of professional messenger account to keep in contact with clients and set up appointments. So I do have that, but other than that, I'm very conscious about whatever goes on the internet is up forever. And if I'm supposed to be somebody's therapist and they can see all these things that I think online, I'm just more cautious, I guess. So I'm like, I don't know, I don't want to mess things up by saying too much online. So I'm less involved, less engaged that way. But I think it's a combination of being busy and maybe being a little more neurotic than Kathryn.
Well, I think there is definitely a sampling bias there. The people that we see very active on the internet, like if I was married with kids, I would not be on the internet nearly as much as I am. And I am going to ask you guys, since you are the perfect parents, about perfect parenting policies. But I think there's so I've been peering into this very weird microcosm, which I will call Mormon land, and like there's this basic predator on Mormon teenagers named John Dehlin, whose job it seems to be to like find Mormon teenagers and like grab them out of the church, right? And so he was a psychotherapist, apparently, that got taken away from him for ethical issues. And now he has this channel called Mormon Voices, and his episodes are 5 hours long. The episodes are set at 5 hours long. It's not like some episodes go 5 hours long. And so I've been seeing so many, like, it seems, psychological techniques that he uses to grab people who are most vulnerable. And it seems to me like anybody who's watching a 5 hour long episode of Mormon Voices is the perfect Mormon teenager for you to get out of the church. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like predatory.
Wow.
Yep, 5 hours is very intense. And if you have somebody sitting and listening to you for that long, you can do a lot with them psychologically over those 5 hours, especially if you have multiple episodes. That's
so apparently I didn't verify this. Somebody told me that he lost his license to practice psychotherapy because he was having inappropriate intimate relations with clients.
Wow. Not that surprised given what he's doing now.
5 hours at a time.
Well, can you imagine, like, if you did have a 5 hour psychotherapy thing with somebody who was a troubled person, like, wouldn't they be mush in your hands?
Yeah.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
So, speaking of perfect parenting and protecting your kids from predators online, so how many kids do you have, if you don't mind?
Oh, we have 3.
3 kids.
They're 16, 14, and 12.
Okay, so the perfect age for online predators.
Yes.
So what are your recommended practices? How did you deal with your kids being online? What have you seen in your experience as counselors? What are problematic things? Did you guys I'm assuming you're aware of, did you read The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff?
I haven't read all of it. I got probably halfway through it and then just haven't come back around. But yeah, I'm familiar with it and with Jonathan's work. Yeah, with our kids, we have their phones, sort of locked down so that they're limited into what they can access. My
like
dog,
they can't go on a browser
website. Yeah, they can text with it. They are able to go on YouTube. I get a report every week about how much time they're spending on their devices. So we monitor that stuff fairly carefully, and it's also connected to just what we believe about screen time versus being engaged in real life. So the kids have a limit of how much time they can spend.
What's the limit?
A day. We have it set for an hour a day, and then on the weekends they have 2 hours that they can be online.
But that includes all screens. So if they want to play video game or watch their brother play video game, or they want to watch a YouTube video, it's all in the 1 hour chunk.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really tight.
Yeah.
It is
I
tight.
cannot imagine my sister getting away with that with my nephews. Especially, like, and I'm okay, I have to say, like, so one thing Jonathan Haidt has said is boys playing computer games with each other, he thinks it's just fine. He thinks that's just boys, like, being boys, and it's not causing any of the negative stuff that girls practicing relational aggression against each other on Facebook and Twitter can be. So, like, have you? Do you treat your? I mean, I assume you have a daughter. Do you treat? Is this gender specific at all? Do you see a difference?
So far, she just has shown no interest in like engaging with people on online platforms. She does have a YouTube channel where she likes to do art, but she likes to read a lot and sketch and do animations.
She goes to an online school, and so as of this last year. And so whenever they message each other on the online school platform, a copy of it goes to my email, so I see all of their things. So she does chat with people, but it's highly monitored, and she just turned 14, and so I think that with girls, you can absolutely get those catty types where it's like they like experimenting in cruelty, and they like to see how far they can push it and how much power they have. But I think that's the odd girl. That's not the typical little girl. I think most young girls are just happy to try to have a buddy and send little pictures they drew back and forth. And it's fairly sweet if you don't get a bad apple. I read Why Gender Matters. Was that Leonard Sachs?
Yeah.
And because he talked about this, and sort of the difference between bullying with boys and girls. And his recommendation was actually, if you run into a social situation with a female bully and the school won't address it, you're best just leaving the school.
Yeah.
Because you get one of those bad apples and they just really do ruin everything. And if the family doesn't rein it in and the school doesn't rein it in, good luck as another parent trying to do anything.
It just seems like there's not really any way of addressing it. Boys will tend to, they'll maybe get into a physical fight, but then typically it's done. And the profiles of the bullies are so different. Like the typical male bully tends to be, low performing academically, is very poor at reading social cues, and tends to pick their targets a little more randomly, other than like maybe they're smaller than them. Whereas the female profile, they tend to be high academic achievers. They tend to be excellent at reading social nuances, and then use all of that to bully. And so, it ends up being much more complicated because you're not dealing with guys. It is typically a lower IQ, lower socially savvy kind of person. And so the girl bullies can pull the strings and make people dance much more than the male bullies can.
Mm-hmm. One dynamic that came up before we pulled Eiley out of school in person and put her into the online school was there were quite a few female bullies, but the kids call them cry bullies because they would manipulate the room and the teachers by crying and playing victim over things. And they would just, act as if they were the aggrieved party. And then all the kids would look around and be like, but we didn't do anything. But then the teachers would take the side of the crying child. And so I feel like that was not a dynamic when I was in school. And I think that there have been maybe some cultural shifts over how you get what you want now. And so I think more our experience with our daughter was more we saw kids who would bully other kids through emotionally manipulating the adults and less through direct attacks. Because if you victimize the other person directly, you don't get power from that anymore. You get sort of sequestered. But if you can pretend like everyone else is bullying you, then you can get things that you want, which is
you lie about being aggressed against.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a really interesting. There are two professors, I believe, of anthropology, who wrote a book, Victimhood Culture, and unfortunately, they're not great speakers, and the videos I've seen of them are kind of boring. But and I have a hard time remembering what exactly they said, but there's honor culture and then there's dignity culture. And in an honor culture, if there's a small aggression, you have to police it yourself, because you can't expect to go to an authority, right? So any slight aggression, you have to stand up to yourself. And in a dignity culture, so those are the types of cultures you end up with duels in. And in a dignity culture, you're supposed to, any slight thing, you're supposed to just let it go, and you're supposed to expect other people to stand up for you for any kind of, something people do, and you're supposed to be very forgiving of everything. And they said, we seem to be switching into this other victimhood culture where you expect authorities, where you demand that authorities deal with any slight aggression against you. So where you would call out people in an honor culture, you would call people out to a duel. You kind of call out for authority to come and vindicate you, and that's become, and that's how they defined victimhood culture, and that made a lot of sense to me.
It makes a lot of sense to me. You see it sort of playing out in broader cultural patterns, but I see it also in the way that they run schools now,
Yes.
where children aren't allowed to sort of address forthrightly a social problem. They're expected to bring it to the teachers, have the teacher adjudicate it, and that's the proper system. Whereas before, like you were saying, you either would have maybe more the I'll deal with it myself, or I'll overlook it and socially we will find a way to resolve this that doesn't involve going to the authority, because that's actually the weak move, is to go have the authority fix it for you. But now that's the appropriate move, and that's what they're told they need to do. But it didn't start with the kids. Obviously, that's like trickled way down from that being instantiated in culture.
Well, and interestingly,
15 years ago?
it seems like the way that the authorities in schools tend to work is that they will only address it in certain circumstances. If you're the wrong type of identity or person, they just don't do anything.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
Wow.
I could think of an instance I heard about recently where one student was getting bullied by, it was a male getting bullied by another gay male, and just like stalking him basically, and bring it to the school. The school just never did anything until the family decided just to move their son to another school because there was no intervention, and their son was like terrified of going to the bathroom alone in case this other kid would show up. And the school just refused to address it. And you can imagine other scenarios where it would blow up, and
Is this high school or elementary?
High school.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I seem to see the professionals that we expected. So I think a lot of parents, especially when it comes to what's become the hot button issue of transgender children, a lot of people get mad at the parents. And to me, it seems like, you know what, if I'm a parent who's relying on the outsourcing my cognition to professionals like psychiatrists, psychologists, pediatricians, right? The people that I trust, the problem isn't with the parents. The problem is with the psychologist, psychiatrist. And if the individual, if the problem is with the individual psychologist or psychiatrist or doctor or whatever, endocrinologist, then we should be looking at the associations which accredit these people, right? But it seems to me that like the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, they're pushing things that professionally, when I talk to competent professionals, which you two seem to be, it's obvious there's something wrong. Why even you two as mental health professionals don't seem to be able to have the effect on policy that I think a lot of people assume you would.
Yeah, well, similarly to the States and Canada here, the governing bodies have become so politicized that everything's written into the mission of like the Ontario Psychological Association or Canadian Psychological Association in ways where there's been a departure from the attempt to be objective in practice, and they're very explicit now about saying, well, you need to be an advocate, you need to be politically active, and that's
required.
That's required. And then you have the various levels of professionals that you tend to have more nuanced thought up top, and what gets trickled down to the popular level is just simplified to a really sad degree. I even think of some of my experience in Northern Ontario, where you have kids being encouraged to transition because they say they're uncomfortable in their body, and I think, well, if you've been raped over the course of 5 or 6 years, like, you're not going to feel comfortable in your body, and so good clinical practice would be to say, let's see how you do when we address the trauma. It's common knowledge that part of working through trauma is learning to inhabit your body and be comfortable within it again. What you'll have, and this is not to pick on social workers broadly, but I will come across referrals from somebody who doesn't have a lot of training. They're kind of going by what is told to them at a popular level, and they're primed to hear this, and so it's like to think in terms of transgenderism. And so kid says, I don't feel comfortable in my body, or they'll ask them like, oh, do you feel comfortable with who you are? No. Oh, well, then maybe it's this. I think it's like similar to what was in the 80s, where this belief that all these people were victims of these satanic cults, and had repressed memories, and it's a fad. And I think that we're going through something similar right now, where there's a fad. Professionals who are gatekeepers to the medical world and maybe getting a psych assessment are not equipped to make fine distinctions between what people are struggling with, and are not equipped to be able to think through carefully other categories that are related. I mean, and granted, in psychology it is difficult. I mean, the latest edition of the DSM exploded even more. There's more categories, and they are very similar to one another. You're making finer and finer distinctions with greater and greater overlap. So it's becoming more difficult to I think make those distinctions. But the people who are most politically active and motivated tend to be the zealots, and so you can find the doctors and the psychologists who want to push an agenda, and that doesn't necessarily reflect everyone else because they're the loudest. Your lower entry gate sort of keeper people go with what they're being told from the top, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's supported by two trends. Like, one, there's not enough mental health workers at all to meet the needs. So what they did was they expanded the boundaries of who could provide mental health care to include people who aren't trained as well as they should be. and then are tackling problems that they really aren't trained for, and sincerely trying to do their best, but then filling in gaps to do that work, but they're not doing it.
And training programs that aren't as robust.
Yeah. So I think that's one trend, is because there was a need for social or mental health workers, you have less people who are qualified doing the job now. But then you also have this larger social shift where, because everything's become so secular, everything has moved to say there isn't really a place for, church, synagogue, mosque. Those are all very private things. Those stay out of the public sector. But then, of course, you have that vacuum. And so then you're looking for, well, who in society will actually give us, who can say what the purpose of a human is? Well, you kind of have philosophy and psychology filling in that gap, but that's really not what psychologists are trained to be able to handle.
And then
not handle, but
I think you go even further than that, where out of all the professions that are out there, psychologists are by far the least religious, by a significant degree, and there's even, I think that they could probably get away with it in a sense. They didn't need to address values as much because the broader culture was still more religious. But as that's receded to the background now, people have a religious vacuum within them, and that the psychologists are not trained to really address that, and are not talking about it. I mean, I will say the APA has identified that as a significant weakness within psychology broadly, and they're wanting to address that. How effective they'll be at doing so is yet to be seen. And in Canada, it's even just more so, being a more secular nation than the States by a significant degree.
Yeah, I was talking to my father about something very similar, and he was an educator for a long time. And he pointed out a dichotomy in the education system, which I hadn't really considered, which was, okay, there is the education system, and then there's the certification system. And he said, in the education system, we don't view our job as gatekeepers. We view them as coaches. We are here trying to get people to succeed, trying to get people the training and the tools they need. And the gatekeeping he expected to be done on the back end, which was, if you go to medical school, the medical school graduates you, and then you go and take your board certification exams, or the same thing with law school. You go to law school, you get your legal education, and then you go and take the certification exam, right? The bar exam. And I actually signed up for a course in becoming a substance abuse counselor because COVID destroyed my insurance business. I'm doing a lot better than most people are. It's just so most of my income is from residuals from previous years. It's just new clients has become really like, the new clients I get are not the same as, so my business model's not working like it was. So I signed up. I started looking at counseling because as someone who's gone through a lot of counseling myself, I'm really interested in it, and I hope I would be an okay one. But when I started looking at the various tracts into it, well, some of them, like, there's no gatekeeping at all. Like, you could become a life coach or a pastoral, and there's zero gatekeeping. And then there's, get a PhD, and there's a lot of master's degrees. And what I noticed was there's there's very little, hey, let's evaluate you and see, because it seems to me that a lot of the skills that a good counselor has, are not necessarily things you're going to get by taking a bunch of courses.
Yes.
And B, there's a lot of life experience. I just turned 45. There's a lot of things that I've learned, and so I like to think of myself as kind of like an avuncular coach to some people who I hope see me as kind of a mentor, and like, there doesn't seem to be any sort of real systematic recognition of everything that goes into that on the gatekeeping side, right? To actually go ahead and say, hey, you know what? You've been so I've been doing a lot of thinking about the LDS. And so their pastors are called bishops, and they're completely lay positions in that it's not paid. It's just the person who's like the leader of their local meeting house, right? And somebody who's been doing that for like 40 years, they shouldn't be in the same position in, I think, providing pastoral counseling than, say, some 18-year-old who's like, hey, I want to become a counselor, right? But our system doesn't seem to be really set up for that in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, well, and I see the differences between different denominations. I for a couple of years I did psych assessments for diaconal candidates for the Catholic Church, and I'd go to Boston and Baltimore and in New York, and I remember thinking, oh man, like they're putting lay people to be deacons through the ringer more than a Protestant seminary that I had attended years before to be clergy. And the training is like several years long. There you're doing a full psych eval, plus you're interviewing the wife, you're going fairly deep into their personal lives, and this is for an unpaid position for somebody who wants to, lead through service. And I've thought, oh man, I figure the day's coming in the Protestant world where that becomes, commonplace, because the Catholics, I don't think that they were doing that before all of this stuff, blew up about sex abuse scandals. But they've learned, and they're, at least the diocese that I interacted with, were very, very serious about it. And were willing to put their money where their mouth was, as far as that decision process came, the gatekeeping, and and we can say this from Baptist background. It's like, oh boy, like, oh man, there's very little, and even even less than, say, a Presbyterian or a Lutheran in terms of outside accountability to higher levels within the church. So yeah,
Chad the alcoholic is here. We have to announce the important man is here, and partially because he's obviously an alcoholic and in AA, and AA provides incredible amounts of both religious support and counseling support in ways that, like, our society just, I shudder to think what our society would be like without AA. and most people are not aware of the system at all. I mean, you would think AA would be getting tons and tons of funding. I don't think they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No.
Sadly, it probably isn't good for optics, and you probably don't make a lot of money off of it. So AA, it's harder to motivate government or corporations or anything like that to be as interested in AA as they should be. Tying it into what we were talking about earlier, the thing is with AA, and Chad, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but usually with AA, so the problem with telling people, like a life coach, oh, you can be a life coach, even though you have, maybe you've taken one course. That's fine if they're going to stick to that. But if they then say, okay, now I'm going to advise you to give your child surgery and to lead them down that road, because they feel like they've got this mandate to be able to just offer mental health care across the board on any topic they feel like, with some sort of conception that there's an authority behind them reinforcing that advice, is very different than, your, it's escaping me, the person who mentors you in AA, your sponsor in AA, who you're going to meet with, you're going to talk about how you're feeling, they're going to reinforce the things within the book. They have a clear mandate. I'm talking about my life, you're talking about your life. We're oriented around this very straightforward path that's difficult to follow but not complicated, and we're doing this thing together. It doesn't lead to the same kinds of problems as people who don't have extensive, Chad doesn't give that kind of advice. And frankly, almost nobody should give that kind of advice. Like, a good therapist won't give that kind of advice, because the good therapist will say, why would you want to make that decision? Let's talk about why you're doing that. What are you thinking about that? Why would this be appealing to you? What would the challenges be if you went down that road? Have you talked to your doctor about that? Like, the role of therapy is not to tell somebody what the solution is to their problems. And if you do that, you're probably not a terribly good therapist. But lots of people sort of have been preached to and been told this is the gospel for all of the suicidal teens, is they have some problem and we could fix it very easily.
So this is why I love Chad. I'm a drunk. What the hey do I know?
Chad knows a lot.
Yeah, that's what I keep on telling him. Yeah.
Well, and you have all these strange dynamics happening within the mental health field too, where there's a desire to be more integrated into the healthcare system, which does tend to be more prescriptive. And in cognitive behavioral therapy, it is much more of okay, this is the program, this is what you're supposed to do. And not that, I mean, I will use elements of CBT in my practice, certainly. How does the saying go? First psychology lost its soul, then it lost its mind. There's it's sort of less and less attention paid to the inner life, the more that it becomes medicalized. There are people where if you talk about, even mention anything remotely psychodynamic, people get up in arms and think that you're a lunatic. Mm-hmm. And yet, I was, over the last few months, spoken to a few psychologists. My observation has been, I find that with the 25 and under crowd, CBT is not working with them. I don't, really? It's not working. At least in the context I'm in. And I've asked, are you noticing something similar, that it tends to work somewhat with your older clients, but not as well with your younger? And the three other psychologists I've talked to, it's not a large sample size, have all just said, yeah, I found the same thing. And, I've been chewing on that observation, and I CBT, it comes from it's Stoic roots, right? And you think of the observations from Jonathan Haidt and others about the way people are being conditioned and the lack of robustness that's being developed within them. It's you try to move forward with fundamentally a Stoic approach, there's not going to be a lot of buy-in.
Well, they don't have the resources to utilize it.
No, because there's a lack of just attachment. And that lack of attachment, what are you drawing upon when you're dysregulated? You can teach people skills, and that's good. I teach people skills. I think that that's a necessary part of therapy, but skills aren't enough. We're not meant to operate as islands. We need to feel that there is support from other people, and even it's not even remotely controversial that one of the greatest protective factors for trauma is perceived social support. The greater support that you experience from those around you, the more that you're buffered from developing PTSD, which is why we have a time limit where first you have acute stress disorder, and then if 2 months later you're still exhibiting the same symptoms, then we say, okay, this is PTSD, and most people don't move to that. And I don't think it's inherent in the people. I think it's what is your social support like? Do you have people who are going to be dismissive of your pain? Do you have people who are going to support you, provide wisdom, direction, and that you can rely upon? And so I can't help but think that the lack of secure attachment in this younger generation coming up is part of why CBT is not really working with them.
Not that that's the only factor that would move you to PTSD.
No.
But it is a factor.
It is a significant factor for. We're socially embedded, right? I mean, I talk to. Mostly I do trauma work, and I just see it where, people that are really tough, that are really strong, and that I admire, but they've been just isolated, and so of course they have difficulty, right? Mm-hmm. So it is more the context around them that determines that than anything really inherent in them. But,
Okay, so I'm going to speak as somebody who had, well, to some extent still does. My PTSD is in remission. Let's put it that way. And I did a lot of psychotherapy, a lot of different types of psychotherapy. And so to some extent, what I found, so CBT, I'm a big proponent of it, but not as talk therapy. And I've lost your video. I don't know if you have my video. So I hear you just fine. But for me, the CBT that works is either through the apps or through the workbooks, which teach you to recognize cognitive distortions. And I think that works really well. And I was very disturbed with the observation that Haidt and Lukianoff made, which is that we seem to be teaching cognitive distortions to our children.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that really bothers me. Mm-hmm. And one person on my Discord server was talking about going to therapy, and I told him, do a CBT workbook or a CBT app first, and then do the talk therapy, because it seems to me that talk therapy and actually talking to someone and doing the psychodynamics and, for me, exposure therapy, just when I was comfortable enough with my psychiatrist, and it took a very long time before I was willing to even explore my memories as they were of the trauma. That is very, very different from CBT techniques that I think really work well. And those are workbooks and apps which seem to work better than I've ever had an experience, even with psychotherapists who were like really into CBT, but it doesn't really, for me, it doesn't seem to be the same, I guess you call it modality. So what I'm curious what an actual professional thinks of all this stuff.
Well, it's interesting with CBT. So context matters so much. And even determining what's a distortion or not, and it does require a certain level of cognitive horsepower. I also do developmental assessments for children and teenagers, and so and often there is a lot of trauma paired with the reason that the person's referred to me that's totally unrelated to that. It'll be the kid's struggling in school. Do they have a learning disability, or they grew up in a less than ideal family, and so there's maybe some fetal alcohol syndrome, or intellectual disability for some other reason, genetic or otherwise. And one of the things I bump up against consistently is because I'll make the care plan and then I'll be in contact with the therapist afterwards. Is they're like, the kid's really, or the teenager's really sweet, but they can't make sense of the principles of CBT. It's just a little too abstract for them. And I find that people who are able to engage in more higher level critical thinking, they'll pick up on that pretty quickly. They can make the applications and they can contextualize to their life in a way that I would say a significant portion of the population is probably not capable of on their own. They need that guidance.
Well, because there's also there's other factors too, like where you have to have somebody who is willing to be engaged in that without the support. Like there's enough people who come to therapy who aren't able or willing to do the work outside of the room. Like they need somebody with them, because otherwise they find it too distressing even just trying to approach it. So then they'll detach or dissociate and they'll move away, and they have a hard time even just attempting the CBT work on their own because they keep shying away from it mentally. So you also have to have somebody who is capable of maintaining focus on those goals of working through things or discovering what those cognitive distortions are, and emotionally, mentally capable of still pursuing that even if that's distressing them. So I think you have to have a certain amount of internal infrastructure already in place to be able to make use of the CBT apps and the CBT workbook. I think the apps are better than the workbook because it can help pull you along like a therapist a little bit. Mm-hmm. Whereas the workbook, it's easier for someone, if they get distressed, to just close it and walk away. I think it depends on the workbook too, because some of them will front load you with sort of distress tolerance skills and awareness that might trigger something, and then a routine that you're supposed to follow if you become distressed to help you maintain working through the workbook. But some of those, they don't. They just jump you right into, okay, now make a list of ways that symptoms that you're seeing. Now make a list of cognitive distortions and lies that you tell yourself. What would some answer to those things be? And they can throw you in pretty fast. So it probably depends a little bit on the workbook or the app too. Do you have one that you recommend to people regularly?
Yeah.
So I lost your video. I don't know if you're asking me or Eamon.
I was asking you, but hang on. Can we get our video back? Because I see.
Yeah, we can see you.
You and
so I don't know. So you're just frozen as far as video. I don't know what's going on.
How about now?
Yeah, you're still frozen. Oh, no, did it move? No. Yeah, you're still frozen. I don't know what. Do you want to disconnect?
Yeah, if we disconnect, we can hit the link again and see if we.
Yeah, try that. So while they're doing that, Chad says, I suggest a run through this 12 steps for anybody anyone suffering from lack of purpose and meaning with help from someone who has done the work. And I have to agree. Part of the reason I actually liked the idea of maybe becoming a substance addiction counselor is I just thought Chad's doing such good work, and he's kind of like the type of person I want to be Chad the alcoholic when I grow up. So I decided to try that. You're back. There you are. Okay, so let's hope this does better. So in Los Angeles County, the County of Los Angeles pays for any resident to do one website that they have. I originally, back when the government of Australia ran, there's a website called Mood Gym, MOODGYM. And it was free when I used it. And that's the one I used, which I still like their method. They called cognitive distortions warpy thinking. And I still see their images in my mind. So it was very useful for me, and I found it great. Now it's no longer free. They charge something like $6 a month or something. I tried the County of Los Angeles one, seemed very similar, seemed very good. If you don't live in Los Angeles County or another jurisdiction which is willing to pay for it, you have to pay for it yourself. Again, I think it's something like $6 a month. You guys know Max? You know Max, Kathryn. So Max is one of the young men who's in our, and he just got his MSW, and he's becoming an LCSW. So he suggested a free app. I haven't taken a look at it, but I trust Max. He's a pretty smart guy. But you brought up something that I think is really important, and we have been shying away from talking about, which is IQ. And Dunning-Kruger and imposter syndrome, and actually something that I've noticed, so there seems to be a psychological trick that culture warriors are using, I believe, which is the people they like are told, the people who are willing to do all the culture war stuff on the wrong side, so the enemy, are told, oh, well, if you have a master's degree, you should put MS in your Twitter profile, right? And then all the people who are actually healthy people, who may actually be doctors, are told, well, isn't that pretentious to go around calling yourself a doctor? Right? And my big thing has been to go around and tell all the people who should be going around calling themselves doctors, who refuse to call themselves doctors, start calling yourself a doctor. I may be talking to you, Eamon, here. Because I'm guessing you're the type of person who's like never gone up and said, hi, I'm Dr. What is your last name, Wilson?
Wilson.
Yeah, I'm sure you don't I'm pretty sure you don't introduce yourself as Dr. Wilson.
No.
Whereas we all know the type of person who goes around calling themselves Dr. whatever, PhD, and they tend to be the people with PhDs in gender studies. And I kind of see a culture warrior thing there, where also a lot of people are encouraged to talk about how, well, IQ doesn't actually matter and you're standardized. I mean, I say this and people think I'm exaggerating, and I'm just being very, very literal. The University of California stopped using standardized exams for admissions into the University of California, which is like UCLA, UC Berkeley, and the Cal State University system stopped using standardized things as well. And that's 50 of the top universities in the world, right? Are supposedly now not using standardized tests for entry anymore. And I am perfectly serious when I say you would not have done as much damage to humanity if you had dropped a nuclear bomb on every single one of their campuses. Because I cannot imagine the type of damage you are doing to humanity by just ruining these centers of learning by letting a lot of people in who just do not have the mental capacity. And at best, they're not going to learn anything. And they're probably going to disrupt. Like, I realize how conspiratorial this sounds to me, but if I were Vladimir Putin or the Chinese Communist Party, I could not imagine a better policy to like cripple the United States than to advocate for the removal of standardized testing from college admissions to, I mean, the UC system, I don't know. I think that dozens of Nobel Prizes have been won by people in the UC system. It's like all of the great research. And just like, what do you think of that and the discussion we have around IQ and the real fact of Dunning-Kruger, which, you know, if somebody, yes, it's very hard to say to somebody, you're not that smart, you're not going to get it, sit down. But if society isn't willing to do that, and one of the things, like when we're in a room and the dumbest person in the room says something dumb, like all the smart people get really quiet and everybody understands that was a dumb thing to say, right? Online, when a dumb person says something dumb, all the smart people are like, I don't even know where to start with that. They shut up. And there's a lot of other dumb people who are like, oh, yes, queen.
Well,
slay.
The amount of time and energy, I don't even like it. I teach at a seminary. I have for the last 4 years, 5 years. And, you know, a good paper doesn't take that long to grade, and a bad paper takes forever. If you're actually going to try to correct what's wrong and try to be, you know, helpful to the person, and, you know, in some ways, protect other people from them. You know, I feel a responsibility there, and it's very, very costly time-wise. And what I see with students doing, you know, the psychoeducational testing that I do, it's I mean, there are real, like, there's real ceilings for people. And yeah, when you do a cognitive test and then an academic test with them, you get to see where that line is, where that ceiling is, and it's very definite. And to say that that's not a real thing is to deny reality. It also is really damaging to the students. Mostly, I think you have a few people who are narcissistic that think that they're brilliant, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Typically, what I see are kids that get passed along. They're in 10th, 11th grade. They're in their senior year, and they know that they don't have foundational skills or understanding, and they're getting moved along anyways. And if you struggled in 9th grade and maybe you would have been better off redoing a class, but you get moved on to 10th, well, now you really feel like a fish out of water. And now in 11th grade, now you have no clue what's going on at all. And maybe that could have been salvaged, and you could have developed some I think real hard-won confidence in what you are able to do, but you're robbed of that by being moved along, and I see that.
And all it
with
can do
kids.
is create anxiety.
Yeah, and then the person is just they just want to avoid school, and you see kids from different communities that will come to Dryden or Thunder Bay, and for some of them it is because they have received subpar instruction, like really, really poor instruction leading up to high school, and they are capable of more, provided that they receive some tutoring. But to pretend that that's not needed, or we're just going to move them along anyways, does them such a disservice, and I think in many ways cripples them for life, because they never are given the opportunity to learn, receive instruction at the proper level. And you see at the graduate level, even I would say my seminary degree was significantly more difficult than my doctorate. I would say, because at Westminster, where I went to seminary, the standards were really high, and they just had no problem failing you. You didn't get the job done, you're just done, and there's no recourse.
No apology.
It's just like, look, you didn't do it, so we're not going to move you along. And there were standards at the doctoral level, but there were certainly more supports that were offered, and which there's something good about that. And thankfully they did have a few key points in the program where it was like, I guess the faculty would get to have a meeting where they just talk about how you are in class, and how you relate to your peers, and they talk to your site supervisors, and they could just tell you, like, sorry, you're unprofessional, you're out. And then the comprehensive exams were another point where you had to demonstrate that you could actually integrate knowledge from different branches of psychology and be coherent and have a clear line of thought for you're doing a diagnosis and then your intervention. But the sense I get is that institutions are lowering their standards, and it's sad. I see it where other psychologists and professionals I speak to that are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. There is a depth and breadth of knowledge there that I assume is at least partially reflective of the robust education that they received, that were no longer really providing for people. I think it was a news article I read about a month ago that said that for the first time ever, the average IQ for a university student is average. That's never been the case.
Which means you have lots of university students with below average IQs.
Yeah.
Which is
so okay. One of the times where my emotional problems really manifested, I was taking this class in quantitative analysis, and I was in a graduate program, very high level graduate program, and I was incredibly frustrated with my incapacity to receive grades which showed my performance over my peers. And I was taking this course in quantitative analysis, and I was literally the only person in the class who understood what the professor was saying at all. He would be talking about things, he would make a mistake, nobody would notice, I would point it out, he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And he knew nobody else understood what was going on. And so the final exam was a take-home exam, and he passes it out and went through the exam, showing the answers straight through. And I could not bring myself to take notes. I went home to write the exam. I could not remember a thing. I could not answer one of these questions to save my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there, like, staring at this. It's like, I am the only person in this class who understands any of the stuff he said. He went through the answers with me a few hours ago. I sat there and I listened to him going through these problems. I cannot, and I ended up not turning it in, and he passed me anyway.
Oh, wow.
But it was like this was part of the reason I ended up dropping out, was I could not. I was 8 units short of getting a law degree and a master's degree at one of the top universities, and I just dropped out. I couldn't like continue because I was so frustrated at being towards the bottom of the class and like having all these people that I knew, like it was incredible. And I realized like this was completely emotional blockage, and one of the reasons I had many years of therapy after that. But it was like there is a demoralization that this does also to everybody, not just the people but like everybody who sees this is. And what I did, which I think a lot of young men do, is I went and played video games. Because guess what? when you're playing a video game, your actual skills do matter, and you like there's the reward system actually working, as opposed to when you're sitting there and the reward system is deliberately not working.
Yes. Yeah.
So feel free to give me as much free psychotherapy as you would like.
I've bumped up against the devaluing of excellence as well. And for somebody who can offer excellence, it's just, it isn't just demotivating, it's angering. It's frustrating because it devalues the things that you do bring to the room. And to be told that what we value more is sort of just like everybody's happy, everybody gets along, everybody did well, we all get our participation trophy. It's almost personal, where you're like, but that's not what I'm here for. I don't want the participation trophy. Like, if you want to tell me I lost, fine, you can tell me I lost. But when you tell me that excellence doesn't matter, then you're pulling down most of the things I care about, because I actually like excellent food. I like excellent art. I like excellent buildings that don't fall around my ears. I actually really value beautiful, excellent, well done things. And so then for me to come in and say, this will be my field, and in my field, I will be excellent. And they say, well, we don't actually care about that here. It's a slap to the face. So when I hear you talking, I'm like, yeah, I know that feeling. I resonate very much with that.
And I see it with young men. I think that's a huge reason why they're falling behind in school generally. I had a client a few years ago where he really enjoyed sports, loved them. And the point that he stopped them, I think he was like in 7th or 8th grade. And they said they just stopped keeping score in baseball. And he was just like, he didn't have the words at that age, but he was just, all he could say was, "This is stupid." But, looking back, he was like, yeah, it was just like, there's no point. And he's a very intense person. He said he would he was like running every day, doing weight training. Like he was just really wanting to get good at it. And it just made it all seem very meaningless. And I think people feel it's meaningless, it's pointless. And I think for our oldest son, some of what he's really benefited from over the last few years, two family friends. They're these men who are like in their 60s, and they're very old school. And one of them has taught him how to. He's been fixing up an old car with him, for the last year or so, and like an old like a '68 Jaguar or something like that. And Burke went in not knowing anything about cars, and he's just learned like how do you do things properly, how do you take care of your tools and put them away, and you just see him just come to life. He just loved it, and learn how to do some metalworking with another guy too. He's out every Saturday, and he's learned how to make like a miniature cannon, and he's just has loved it. He's like, "Oh, Dad, I know why trigonometry matters now," and I've just watched this confidence just grow in him week after week after week. And, we were talking about future plans, and he's interested in maybe getting into medicine, and we'll see what happens. He also really likes working with his hands. And, said, hey, we have a medical school that's close by, and, this could be an option for you. And he's like, well, maybe, but I want to know, like, what are some of the most difficult schools to get into because they have the highest standards? So like, this is great. I love hearing this from my son, that he wants to strive for the best. He doesn't know whether he'll get it or not. There's definitely some expression of like, well, I don't know, but I want to try. And I know that that's been cultivated in him in part through these two older men. And I'm very, very, very thankful for the interest that we've had. And I think that they've enjoyed time with him, and that he's wanted to improve. So yeah, I just agree with you, and see how people are being robbed of satisfaction, enjoyment, and then motivation. It's like, no wonder we have people so unmotivated.
The meaning crisis. Yeah. So Chad says, go into the construction trades, kids. Want to be smart? Make your first smart move and join a trade, and don't pay so much for college. If I had it all to do over again, so I'm the child of immigrants, and I thought in high school, my parents just don't get it, and I have to listen to my high school counselors and society at large, and go after what I love. And my dad, he pointed to the neighbor who was a plumber, and he said, look, he has a successful life. That's why you're going to college. And I'm like, oh, this is old country thinking. And if I had it all over to do again, maybe I would have become an electrician, but plumber, electrician, honestly, going into construction, partially because it is the last, I think a lot of us had this idea that, the colleges may have had all this ideological rot, but when people got into the real world, meritocracy would take over. And it seems that it's only in construction where people are actually worried about things falling down, which makes me think, you know what? No, that's actually not true. Do you guys listen to Glenn Lowry? Do you know who he is?
I do. I've listened to a few clips here and there.
He is brilliant. He is one of the most intelligent thinkers in the world, and the reason nobody will listen to him is because he's a black man, and he's a black man who's conservative, and he was a Christian. He's kind of coming back to it, but because of that, he's completely persona non grata everywhere. And he had this law professor from Yale on with a book about how meritocracy is so bad and wrong. It's like I point people to this interview as just an example of luxury beliefs, right? Because if this professor at Yale Law School in any way actually believed the bullshit that he's speaking, first of all, Yale Law School would be picking their students at random.
Yeah.
And second, why doesn't he just quit and let somebody without his capacities take over his job? It's just such obvious clown world stuff that I seriously think anybody who says something that stupid should lose his job.
Why do you think that happens? That someone in a position like that will say something so outlandish. I've wondered how much is guilt that people feel. I suspect that drives a lot of it. There's this article, I remember who wrote it. I think I read it like 4 or 5 years ago. The Strange Persistence of Guilt, and yeah, in it, the author is saying that the word guilt has sort of disappeared from public discourse, but it pops up all over the place, and we have no way of dealing with it. And I think the other one is shame. I see it everywhere, and yet people are not able to name it. And those are powerful, powerful drivers for the human psyche. And I admit there's times I feel it, where I have a good job, and I'm able to provide for my family, and I'll have clients where I think they're wonderful people. I know their stories. I know their life, inside out, especially if I've been meeting with them for a while. And there is this feeling of like, man, I'm going to go home. I have my wife and my kids, and I have a nice home, and relative financial security. And I know this person, like, we're done our therapy, and they're heading for their next shift at McDonald's, and they're barely getting by. And I feel that, like, oh, something doesn't feel right about this, because I don't feel like I'm better than them in any way. And yet, I do believe that it's like you have skills, you have abilities that are unique, and you should be compensated for them. And because of that, I'm very very committed to having a portion of my client load be pro bono work. But I think without that, I think that guilt would eat away at me more. And I have, as a Christian, I have a way of looking at the world where I can place those things, guilt and shame, and what's appropriate guilt and inappropriate guilt, and what to do with those emotions of feeling like the inequality is something that's uncomfortable. And I never want to offload it to the state, but it means that I have to be doing something about that personally. And I suspect that when you're an atomized individual, you just have these icky feelings, and you don't really know where to place them or what to do with them. And you have a belief system that's given to you in woke ideology that allows you to not really be that guilty individually. And you can offload responsibility to society at large. But I am sympathetic to that. But that's what I don't know what you think about it.
So you seem to have a telepathic link with Chad, and like say the same things over and over again. I don't think you're the same person, but with the mask, you never know. But I think that's part of it. I think the ideology is part of it. I think what has been very useful to me and why I have so much started focusing on the work of Vervaeke and to some extent also Ian McGilchrist is this idea of distributed cognition and cognitive outsourcing. And this is something I think I've kind of been trying to figure out for long enough. This idea of think for yourself and the idea that your thoughts are contained in your mind, like within this area, is just false. It's just false. And we think we outsource our sanity to other people. We emulate people in ways we don't recognize. And one of the things, so I don't know how much you know about Edward Bernays. So it's a funny thing. The only people who know about him have heard these weird conspiracy theories that like border in anti-Semitism because he was Jewish. He was Freud's nephew, and he made Freud famous because he came up with the field of public relations. And and he wrote a book called Propaganda, which was talking about propaganda actually positively in the 1920s, I want to say. It's a short book, and I highly recommend reading that book and not Jacques Ellul's book Propaganda, because Bernays had this very naive idea that if he were to reveal what Vervaeke calls psychotechnologies, and I was so glad to have this name for them, but psychotechnologies for the manipulation of society. So Bernays thought if he reveals them and teaches them to lots of people, then people will be prepared, and so it would kind of make society better because people would be better using them. And then a lot of people took these psychotechnologies and started using them to what I call hack our distributed cognition, right? Mm-hmm. And they're very sophisticated ways of looking at social groups. And one of the most prominent ones is by recognizing, you know what? So my brother-in-law is the head medical executive of a medical group of 5 million people, okay? He's a doctor, surgeon, incredibly competent. I respect him immensely. When I talk to him about something, he listens and he evaluates it based on what it is. He reads the Journal of the American Medical Association. He reads the Lancet. And he assumes everything in there is absolutely true in ways that he would never do to anything that he was actually evaluating. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't even because we outsource our cognition in that way and we're trained to do it. And so my brother-in-law, who gets paid a lot of money, and if I wanted to convince him of things, it would be very, very difficult, right? Reads the Journal of the American Medical Association, and the editors of the Journal of the American Medical Association are a lot easier to influence than the writers and the readers. And this is this is one of the major things that Bernays realized. And so the field of public relations developed in, oh, well, you know what? We'll start our own journals, and so things like idea washing and things like that. So what we have is very, very complex psychotechnologies being used by people to hack our distributed cognition. And you end up with these things that it's just impossible to understand. Why has our social, intelligent, so Wikipedia, right, is incredibly influential. Incredibly influential. People go to Wikipedia in ways, and so the largest public relations firm in the country is called Edelman. In the world is called Edelman. Their annual income is about $1 billion a year. One company. And basically all they do is try to influence our distributed cognition. So I cannot imagine they spend less than $50 million a year, at least, trying to hack Wikipedia to get the entries they want. Yeah. But nobody's thinking about this stuff. The only person who's really talked about it is one of the founders of Wikipedia, Larry Sanger. And he's been trying to find some sort of answer to this, but he hasn't been able to. But that's why my primary project is, in fact, trying to secure our distributed cognition. Because, I think part of it is, and the stuff we've been talking about, doctors, why aren't doctors going, hey, no, it's not all right to give 12-year-olds surgery for things without doing a good differential diagnosis, which includes seeing, is this an autistic girl who's being highly affected by people, right? So I don't want to rant at you, but this is the core of what I've been trying to figure out in my life.
Yeah. Well, and that's where, with our kids, we're very aware of what's going on out there, and it's tricky. We don't want them to be too sheltered, and at the same time, we're not wanting them to be just bombarded by what's out there. At least we'll see what happens over the next few years with them. This stuff that's really boring. It's like I go for a walk almost every night with my oldest son, and we spend probably a half hour, 45 minutes just talking about life. Spend time with my daughter and my other son, and we're talking a lot. We're spending a lot of time together. We encourage them to spend time with their friends as well. That online world. Share son, he's just not interested in it, really at all. He's happy painting his miniatures right now, and he likes to go out and swim and fish and kneeboard and ski, and my parents are very involved and happy to see them. They have a family system that is very interested and engaged with them, and they're interested back. And we've been very, very blessed to have the time to do that, and to model for them. How do you handle conflict and emotions, and when they get out of line, it's not stop that, unless there's somebody being hurt in the moment. It's like, okay, let's talk this. Why is this a problem? Why are you doing this? Why? What are your other options here for how you could have handled it? What's the goal here? And they demonstrate that. I mean, I hear them bicker sometimes downstairs, and I get a kick out of it, because they're fighting, and I can hear they're like, well, Burke, well, when you did this, I was trying to do this, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, and then you hear them go back and forth. They're talking it out, and I'm not. I love it when they work it out without us being involved at all, and that they're using that we've tried to teach them, and I'm under no illusion that it means that they're going to go out to university and they're just going to be fine. I'm expecting there's going to be a lot of struggles, but I figure the attachment with us during this phase of their life is important for us to be involved and engaged, and then to also be moving them out. But I think when I look at social media, the fact that they're not interested in it makes it easy. But if they were to become more interested in it, I would be frank about what I think it is, and where it can be used positively and where it's negatively. And we would hope that there would be open dialogue about it. I wouldn't want it to be something that they have to hide. But I don't feel any need to encourage them into it really either, especially when I see how especially with our two older kids right now, they're just very engaged in their hobbies and their relationships and in the outside world.
Well, and it feels like with most of social media, the distributed cognition you get there is the most unrefined.
Yeah.
It's not the type that you would hope what your children would be accessing as their distributed cognition.
Yeah. And the homeschooling side of it that we've recently stepped into, it's been great. And just having different types of conversations. Their distributive cognition is increasingly like sort of the classics. I love hearing my daughter saying like, "Oh, I was reading about the 12 Caesars, and how I'll talk about how they died." And it's like, great, okay, tell me about it. And Burke, similarly with some of the philosophy he's reading, and it's coming out in conversation. It's like it's found some soil there, and the other side of it has been that I think they feel a little more alien to their peers. They spend time with them, and it's like their peers aren't talking about those things. And the encouragement, from my end with our kids has been like, keep engaging with them. Don't be snooty. Don't disengage or think that you're better than them at all. You can learn how to be a good friend here, and I think because there's been consistency. They'll talk, and they're kind of weird kids. Like my oldest, I remember I'd come back from class or from work, at 7:00, and he'd be 6-7 years old, and he would just be like, "Dad, I've already made some tea for us. Can we go talk outside?" So it's like, okay, we're going to have tea and we're going to talk. And I know that that's not normal, but he's just always been like that. He's always been wired in that way.
So I think we only scheduled this for 2 hours, and it's getting there. I will definitely keep you on for another 2 hours if you're willing. But and you brought up so many interesting things. I would love to talk to you about homeschooling and the intergenerational thing, because I actually think the intergenerational thing is huge. But I also want to give Kathryn a chance to talk about Thunder Bay.
Oh, thank you. Well, I am very excited about Thunder Bay. So, for all of you listening who don't know, Thunder Bay, September 15th to 17th, I believe, we are having Paul Vanderklay, Jonathan Peugeot, John Vervaeke, and a local professor, Richard Mondrell, all come together. And we are going to have sort of attempting to access distributed cognition, actually, around the topics of consciousness and conscience. So the format will be, we'll have all four of them will take about an hour, and they will talk about whatever they want to say on those topics. But then I'm going to be pairing them off, so it'll be little dyad conversations that we all get to sit in on and watch them talk, and a Q&A afterwards, and then panel discussion. But then also I'm going to have a couple of question times where it's going to be each of the speakers in different rooms with an open chair. So the audience can come up, and if you are somebody like Jacob, who has their own YouTube channel and lots to say, you can come up and sit on the chair with the moderator.
I can't come.
See what you want.
I can't come.
That's tragic.
I know. I would love to come, but the reason why I can be the dilettante that I am is that so the insurance business is very seasonal. So I do like 90% of my work in October, November, December.
Okay.
And like I spend the rest of the year like getting ready and prepared for that. So it's like, yeah, September. It's when is the date? September
15 to 17.
Yeah, it's like no. And I took 3 weeks off for that road trip to Chicago and back.
Amazing.
It has. I usually come back from my vacations and I want a vacation from my vacation, and it's been incredibly exhilarating and inspiring, and the Mormon thing, like on my way back, I needed a place to stop as I was driving from South Dakota back to Los Angeles, and Salt Lake City was there. I'd never been there. And I scheduled a stop there, and I went to the Great Salt Lake, which is not considered one of the great places to go see. And there's this place called Sunset Beach, and on Google, somebody was like, the sunsets there are beautiful, and they are. And I went there around 6, and sunset was like 9, and I was sitting there just thinking, and I kind of got this calling, like this thing, like, why are there no religious Mormons in our circle? Partially because it's like, so I really believe what Jesus said about by their fruits you shall know them is like, that is the most Jewish. After Mark 12, where he says the first commandment is the Shema and the second one is you shall love the right. It's like the most Jewish thing he said is by their fruits you shall know them. And like, I'm like, the Mormons are like, they're stereotypically like, they're just too nice and good and like, right? And and Jordan Peterson's message seems so perfect. Like, and why don't we have any religious Mormons? What's going on? By the way, I put the thing to Urban Abbey on conference.ca/conference in it's on the screen, it's in the chat, so people can go there. And I started looking into it, and and the past 3 weeks have absolutely been a crazy thing, because I used to actually do events organizing, a lot of it. And so by weird chances, I've met all these Mormons, and like there's a whole Mormon lobster group, which I started talking to you about. And the minute I joined their Facebook group, their announcement is LobsterCon is canceled. Their 4th annual LobsterCon is canceled. And I'm like, okay, I used to run conventions. Like, there's got to be some, so I have to do something. So we're like, and so coming back from a 3-week vacation, like, if anybody's been paying attention to my channel, they'll see I've been putting out a lot more content. I've been doing a lot more conversations. I've also been talking to a lot of new people, and I'm trying to kind of like bring the Mormon corner of the internet into our corner of the internet, because like there's so much there, and so much valuable. Like I have PVK's text phone number. I don't use it. I sent him a couple of things, which was like, okay, you need to take a look at this. Like, for example, the guy who runs the Facebook group, he had a discussion. He tried to start a podcast. It has 17 views. And the first discussion, and I'm like watching it, and they're talking, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm gay. I'm married with 3 children, and just like explaining why he did that because of the church and stuff. And I was like, Paul might want to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, how did this like so I sent that video to Paul, but like it's just been really crazy. It's been really crazy.
Well, I want to hear in more detail later, because I'm sure that's been quite the journey. It's out of left field, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, all of this has been out of left field for me. Like, I don't even know how long ago it was. It's like been 15 years since I left the Hasidic lifestyle. And I did it because I was like, this is not the life that God wants for me. I don't know why. I don't understand it, but it's obviously not, which was incredibly demoralizing and like crushing, and I had no idea what to do with my life. And here I am, and like I could not be more sure that I am so sure that it feels like I'm doing what God wants, that I'm like, this is a little too much. Like, I'm being a little like this. No, this can't be. Like, what if this is like the demonic leading me off the straight, like the path, because it's too perfect. You know what I mean?
That's a nice problem to have to wrestle with.
I guess I would feel a lot less worried about it. I went to this rabbi who's like the person who I respect the most, and I said to him, I have no idea why things are working out so well. And he's like, don't worry about it, which is the only thing. Like, he's like, that's an okay problem to have.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anything else you guys want to say?
I guess just that this was really lovely. It was nice to meet you, Jacob, and yeah, I'd be happy to do this again sometime. I'd be thrilled.
Oh, I would love to do this again whenever you have time. One thing I have decided is no matter how much people have fun with my rants, the conversations are really where it's going, and we need to be having the conversations that Paul cannot have. Like, this is so okay. So I don't know if I'm sure Eamon doesn't know this, but like, you know my thing with Jethro?
No.
Okay, so what I keep on bringing up with Paul Vanderklay is when I say Jethro, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, because he knows enough of his Bible that he knows who Jethro is. Whereas a lot of people have no clue. And that's, I think, really, really important, because Jethro was Moses' father-in-law. And what happens is Moses is trying to do everything himself, and Jethro says, no, you can't do this. What you have to do is you have to set up a hierarchy, and you have to have Sarah Lothem, the leaders of tens and the leaders of thousands. And when things come up the line to you, they'll come up to you, right? You need to have this hierarchy there. And I feel like our society has really lost its hierarchy, has lost this sense of having, you know, the leaders of tens and the leaders of thousands and Moses. And like all of this lost knowledge from the Torah, right? It's right there. And so I want to live in a place where I say Jethro and everybody knows what I'm talking about. And also I want to live in a society where I don't need to say Jethro, because we actually have that type of structure, right? And what I've been trying more than anything, and like I considered calling our conversation Project Jethro, because like I was saying, I'm trying to stop us from being the atomized individuals. I want us to start making larger and larger molecules, right? And I thought the most basic molecule, two people, it's husband and wife, right? So I highly encourage Kathryn and Eamon for you guys to start your own YouTube channel where you start having conversations.
It's a good idea.
You know what, Kathryn's been working on me, so I hear it from you as well. Maybe.
As a couple, StreamYard makes it incredibly easy. It's only $20 a month, and it makes it incredibly easy. Everything's through your web browser, and it's their connection, and they will broadcast to as many places as you want. So you don't need a high connection. You don't need to learn OBS and all the other stuff. Like if you want to do some of the more complicated stuff, you can use OBS and like sound. I've ended up having to start using a sound mixer, and I am using OBS, but you don't have to. And you can send an invite link, like the link I sent you, to anybody. It's just for this conversation, and I can have up to 10 people on here at once.
Nice.
And they have all this stuff that makes it really easy, including like putting the stuff up really easily. So I StreamYard, get a Twitch channel, Facebook, and you just have to set it up once. Facebook, YouTube, you can put it on Twitch and whatever, and you can start having conversations like this stuff. And the two of you, I mean, this is what you guys are good at, is conversations, right? You're professionals. You're professionals.
We at least know we're better than we used to be. That at least.
Well, I look forward to the two of you being as famous as Dr. Ruth and all the other, and Dr. Laura and Dr. Eamon is going to
Dr. Eamon and his better half.
There you go. Sound perfect. Dr. Eamon and his better half. I love it. Okay. Unless there's anything else to say, I am going to let you guys go. I usually stick around after my live streams in case people want to make comments. This was very popular. Lots and lots of people came, and only a few of them. And I'm sure this is going to be one of the best videos on my channel, because this was, you guys are great, and you were great on PVK's channel, and yeah, do it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll let you go. Bye.
All right. Take care.
Okay, people, if there are people in the chat stream who want to make comments and talk about stuff, I'm not going to bother with Claire. But Ben said something. Most social media is toxic, so if couples do have to go on it, shared is probably best. I have to definitely agree with that idea. I am going to go get a drink of water. If people want to say stuff, go ahead, and I will be back. Okay, seeing no comments, I am going to end the broadcast.